Tonight on CFTK-TV News, Royal Columbian Hospital isn't taking every possible patient at the moment, as Stanley Park totem pole was taken down for some restoration work, and closing arguments in a major double murder trial continued.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Maslin, and here's what's making the news in the Northwest and beyond for today. Earlier this week, the Terrace RCMP informed the public that they were seeking out a man who had seemingly been involved in an aggravated assault at the end of August in Thornhill, where a woman got really hurt. Now they have put out an update stating that the man that they were looking for and eventually arrested, Nathan Ridsma, has been formally charged with 1 count of aggravated assault. Ridsma already made a court appearance for this case on September 3rd and is set to visit the courtroom again in a few days on September 9th while remaining in police custody. This was not Ridsma's first run-in with the law, as he had previously pled guilty to other charges in other cases, like obstructing a police officer, impaired driving, and a different assault case in 2018. Yesterday evening, the Regional District of Bulkley-Nechako made the decision to reissue an evacuation alert due to the Sabina Lake wildfire located close to Burns Lake. In terms of the area it covers, the alert is said to account for every single property and dwelling between Skins Lake and Chislata Lake, west of the Marilla Main FSR, south of the Chislata River, and lastly north of Utsa Lake. The Bulkley-Nechako Regional District previously put out an evacuation alert for the same area on August 31st, but rescinded it a few days later on September 3rd. Ambulances are now taking only the most serious patients to Royal Columbian Hospital, as staff are working through a controversial upgrade to an electronic record system. As CTV's Penny Daflos reports, similar upgrades at other hospitals have not gone so smoothly.
One of the busiest hospitals in BC is now turning away non-urgent patients who arrive by ambulance and sending home some admitted patients as Royal Columbian Hospital undertakes massive changes to a new digital record system.
We will drop efficiency initially, and that's why we try to get our capacity down to a manageable level.
Paramedics are already bracing for the impacts as ambulances spend more time on the road taking patients elsewhere.
These increased patients going to other hospitals that don't normally take on those types of patients could result in waits at the hospitals and offload delays and our members being stuck in the hospital for prolonged periods of time.
On Saturday morning, RCH will upgrade from pen and paper to a fully digital system called Meditech Expanse. It was originally supposed to happen in April.
We will have questions and we will be learning some of it on the fly, but I think the base preparation is there.
Administrators are taking extra steps to maintain services and get staff up to speed.
There's kind of an operations center that meets 3 times a day for the next 2 weeks. And I think we have to be nimble with these sort of situations. So I think that we have planned for 6 weeks of ramp up and extra staff.
All of these changes are being undertaken to try to avoid the kind of growing pains that Fraser Health saw at other sites that rolled out the technology.
We've actually revamped our whole training experience.
Eagle Ridge Hospital was the first to do the upgrades last year and saw a third fewer patients as doctors and nurses spent way more time doing clerical work with the new system. Multiple sources have described it as inefficient, time-consuming, and needlessly complicated.
The reason that we're going through this is actually for patient safety and patient care. We are going to be able to deliver high-quality patient care with real-time clinical decision support and reduced patient safety events.
BC is years behind other provinces and countries, with Royal Columbian the latest hospital to catch up, even if it means delays and hiccups along the way. Penny Daflos, CTV News, New Westminster.
Coming up next, mental health support improvements are being discussed after a violent incident. Welcome back. Some recent violence in BC is once again highlighting the need for better mental health support. But could that include reopening the shuttered Riverview Hospital? CTV's Rob Buffum looks into that.
The unprovoked stranger attacks in the heart of downtown Vancouver Wednesday have prompted calls for more action on public safety and mental health.
How many British Columbian families have to go through this hell, this pain?
Port Coquitlam's Mayor Brad West says the senseless crimes highlight the need to reopen Riverview, the Coquitlam mental health hospital that housed thousands but was shut down in 2012.
How many more times does this have to happen before the government recognizes the historic stupidity of the decision to close Riverview Hospital? We need people like this to be off the streets and in an institution.
Nanaimo's mayor agrees and reiterates his calls for involuntary care, putting folks at risk to themselves or others in a facility for treatment, whether they consent or not.
Violent random attacks will continue until we accept as a society that there are people on our streets who should be in secure and voluntary care.
Public safety linked to decriminalization, mental health, and bail reform has simmered as a political issue. All three provincial leaders weighing in on these latest attacks.
If we can't put them away, then we're going to have to start looking at the Mental Health Act. If somebody is at risk of harming themselves or others, they should not be allowed to be out in the public.
Preventative, proactive access to mental health care. That's why we proposed having psychologists covered under MSP.
We'll look into the background and see what, if anything, we could have done differently here. You're going to see announcements from us about more assertive care for people who are struggling in this way.
While not as prominent as healthcare or housing, expect this crime to elevate the issue in the weeks ahead, says this pundit.
It's the kind of thing that can get people nervous, especially because of the area where this happened.
The Premier says there will be an NDP announcement next week regarding mental health and public safety, as these alarming crimes generate growing calls for change. Robert Buffum, CTV News, Victoria.
It was day 3 of closing arguments in the double murder trial of a man accused of fatally shooting an innocent teenager and rival gang member in Vancouver in 2018. The defense just had its final chance to sway the jury before they begin deliberations. And a warning, you may find some of the video we're about to show disturbing. CTV's Ben Nesbitt has more from the BC Supreme Court in Vancouver.
Defense lawyer Richard Fowler spent the day methodically pointing out what he called holes in the Crown's case, including no clear motive as to why the accused, Kane Carter, would be at the scene and the lack of a murder weapon. There's simply too many gaps in the evidence, gaps in time, gaps in people's memories, Fowler told the jury. Crown's theory is that Carter was sitting in this burgundy van south of the intersection of Broadway and Ontario Street, standing guard to protect his associate Matthew Navis Rivas as he dined at Indochine restaurant with his girlfriend on January 13, 2018. They say after rival gang member Kevin Whiteside opened fire at them, Carter shot at him from the van, killing him and 15-year-old Alfred Wong, who was in the back seat of his parents' car as they drove along Broadway. Fowler brought up phone records, which showed there were no calls or texts between Carter and Navis Rivas or his girlfriend in the time leading up to the shooting. If this motive for Mr. Carter to be there is to protect Mr. Navis Rivas must have known for some need to be protected. There's no evidence of that at all. Addressing the 3 bullet casings found in the van, police later discovered in the underground parking lot of the Surrey condo building where Carter rented a unit. Fowler says those casings were later linked to a gun involved in a shooting in the fall of 2017 in Vancouver, while Carter was living in Ontario. There's actually no evidence before you that Mr. Carter had access to the type of gun likely used in these killings. Fowler also mentioned that roughly 4 weeks passed between the day of the shooting and when police found the van at the Surrey condo, saying others could have accessed it during that time. The judge is now expected to give the jury its final instructions on Friday before deliberations will begin. Ben Nesbitt, CTV News, Vancouver.
One of the iconic Stanley Park totem poles was dismantled and moved across town for some much-needed restoration work. CTV's Shannon Patterson now on what needs to be done to ensure that the pole can be enjoyed for years to come and where it will be displayed next.
On the back of this flatbed truck, a piece of Stanley Park history.
This was a really incredible day. We saw the taking down of Ellen Neal's Kakatsolas totem pole, which has been here in Stanley Park since 1986.
When Alert Bay artist Ellen Neal carved this pole in Stanley Park back in 1955, she was a trailblazer.
She was actually one of the very first and prominent female Indigenous carvers. She had a carving shack set up here at Prospect Point.
She was definitely someone who stepped out and used the skills that she learned from her grandfather, Charlie James, and put that to work for herself and created her own art business.
This totem pole was originally commissioned by Woodward's in Edmonton. When the department store closed in the mid-'80s, it was donated to UBC's Museum of Anthropology. It was loaned to the Vancouver Park Board and placed alongside others in Stanley Park.
So it's been there a number of decades, and the conservators from the Museum of Anthropology did regular checkups on the pole. That's actually how we discovered that it was starting to rot a little bit in certain places that would have really compromised the pole.
So the Neal family made the difficult decision to move the pole from Stanley Park to the museum for much needed restoration.
The conservators did say that it could take anywhere from 6 to 8 months to make sure that they debug the pole, because there's definitely been critters setting up house in there.
And some detailed restoration work is going to be undertaken so that it can stabilize it and restore it back to its original beauty. And then it's going to be put up again in the Great Hall.
For the granddaughter of the carver, who's an artist herself, watching the pole leave the place where it was first created was bittersweet.
And it did feel kind of sad. It was like losing somebody. But you know, the moment the workers took the wings off the Thunderbird, seeing them care and take such care, it turned from sadness to excitement.
Excitement that the pole will be carefully restored to be enjoyed by generations to come. Shannon Patterson, CTV News, Vancouver.
Turning to tonight's weather, the north coast is set to deal with a chance of showers as well as a low at 12 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area should see a chance of showers too, but a low at 13 degrees instead. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District will instead get clear conditions, but with a low down at 3 degrees. On the north coast, the upcoming week will begin with rain and clouds, then transition to a bit of sun before going back to clouds as the high bounces between 16 and 14 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them will also start off with a bit of rain, then switch to mixed sunny and cloudy days while the high shifts from 20 to 17 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, the next week or so will see a somewhat sunny day, then a rainy day, then a purely sunny day, and lastly some cloudy days, while the high moves from 24 to 18 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is a special travel advisory, paving operations, utility work, construction work, crack sealing, and the Usk Ferry is out of service due to the low river level. Highway 37 has some maintenance, fog patches, and roadside brushing. There is some construction work on the Nishka Highway, and the Telegraph Creek Road has fog patches. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, the trial of a 14-year-old and his father over a school shooting in Georgia began. Welcome back. A warning that some viewers may find this next story hard to watch. A car drove through a recent demonstration in Winnipeg and hit a cyclist. Protesters were demanding answers in the death of a woman who was hit by a police cruiser earlier in the week. CTV's Denton Unger has the details.
Chaos erupted at this protest on Portage and Main Wednesday. Video captured by CTV News on the scene appears to show the driver of this car trying to drive through protesters who blocked the intersection, hitting one cyclist in the process before being swarmed.
I was hit by the car. I stepped out of the way before he could do any more damage.
The cyclist, who does not want to be identified by name, tells CTV News their bike was run over as the driver sped away, but the car was quickly stopped by protesters, some of whom jumped on top of it, smashing in the windshield and trying to grab the driver.
Enough!
Others had to intervene, breaking up the confrontation before police arrived.
There have been so many people dying on the streets in Winnipeg this summer.
The protest was meant to bring attention to the death of a woman struck and killed by a police cruiser earlier this week.
It breaks my heart that my sister's gone. She was the sweetest, kindest person there is out there.
Lori Bateman says her sister Tammy was staying at a homeless encampment in Fort Rouge Park when she was hit by a police car Monday evening and died in hospital.
I'm still in shock about this. It disgusts me, and I'm pissed off and I'm upset.
Winnipeg police say officers were driving through the park to drop someone off at the encampment when they hit Tammy.
On behalf of the whole membership of the Winnipeg Police Service, I want to offer my condolences and thoughts to the family, her friends, her community.
I want them accountable for what they did to my sister.
The march continued down Main Street to the Winnipeg Police headquarters, where protesters lit a sacred fire for Tammy and called for an external investigation into her death.
Her sister did not die in vain, and we will get justice.
Now to the latest on the deadly school shooting in Georgia. The 14-year-old suspect and his father recently made their first court appearances. The teen was charged as an adult with 4 counts of murder. His father, who was also arrested and charged with murder in the rampage that left 2 students and 2 teachers dead. ABC's Morgan Norwood with what we've learned from those hearings.
Colt Gray, the 14-year-old accused in the mass shooting at Appalachian High School in Georgia, making his first court appearance. The teenager charged as an adult with 4 counts of felony murder, the judge laying out his rights, and Gray did not enter a plea. Less than an hour later, his father Colin, also arraigned, charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder, 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter, and 8 counts of cruelty to children. The 54-year-old nervously rocking back and forth in his chair.
These charges stem from Mr. Gray knowingly allowing his son, Colt, to possess a weapon.
Sources tell ABC News investigators believe Colin gifted his teenage son with an AR-15 style rifle for Christmas, which authorities say he used to kill 2 teachers and 2 students. This video showing a long gun on the floor in a hallway inside the school.
We're heartbroken. A young person brought a gun into a school, committed an evil act, and he took lives.
ABC News also learning of potential missed warning signs. The FBI confirming they received anonymous tips as early as May of last year about a disturbing post Gray is believed to have made on the social media site Discord, where they say he had possibly threatened to shoot up a middle school the next day. According to the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, he denied making the post during an interview at the time. His father telling investigators there were guns at the house, but his son did not have unsupervised access, adding that his son was being picked on at school. Colt was never arrested, but later transferred to this new county, where authorities say Wednesday he terrorized his own peers.
Desks, chairs, whatever we could really put, we just put it in front of the door, hoping the shooter won't come in. Really, it's just scary. God was watching over us that day.
Now, the judge initially said that Colt's 4 felony murder charges came with a maximum penalty of death or life in prison with or without parole. He then called him back inside the courtroom to state since he's underage, he can't face the death penalty. Colt and his father are due back in court on December 4th. Morgan Norwood, ABC News, New York.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is down 17.77 cents. The price of gold is down $18.50. Oil is down $1.48. Natural gas is up 3 cents. Aluminum is down $18. In Toronto, the TSX is down 206.85 points. The Venture Index is down 5.06. In New York, the Dow Jones is down 410.34, and Nasdaq is down 436.83. Still ahead, BC's largest school district is undergoing some adjustments. Welcome back. Now to growing pains in the province's largest school district. Some 80,000 students are enrolled in Surrey, and many of them headed back to class this week in either portables or on an extended day schedule. CTV's Yasmin Gandam has more on how parents are adjusting to the new normal.
When the bell rings, hundreds of students pour out here at Walnut Road Elementary. With just one playground, there's not enough room for every child to be on it.
Has 9 portables, and it certainly takes away the play space and the parking space and things that are needed for students and for teachers.
The school was built to accommodate just over 300 kids. Now there are 800, many of them in portables. It's the reality across the district, with the construction of schools not keeping up with the rapid population growth.
It's 20 new schools, 19 additions, and the site acquisition of 21 sites. This is just to alleviate the current problem.
The district has been forced to come up with short-term solutions, extending hours for senior students in 6 schools, who are now on a 5-block system or an extended day.
What I would call the best of the worst case scenario from all the options that were presented to families back last fall.
Her daughter is one of them, with different hours each day.
She's, trying to have part-time work after school, and each day is different, and that kind of pushes into that time frame.
But some parents aren't able to send their kids to the closest school. 2 elementary schools, Latimer Road and Bay Ridge, are not taking any more students.
The schools that are overflow for the school behind us are about a half-hour walk away. So you're now going to be hauling your children to and from school.
The province has consistently said they've spent more money in Surrey than they have in any other district, but it's not enough.
And we have as many children in portables as some school districts have in schools. So that's over half of them.
Larson says without more money, every school will be forced to move to an extended day very soon, or students will have to learn virtually or in a hybrid system. Yasmin Gandam, CTV News, Surrey.
The Cariboo Regional District wants voters to okay borrowing up to $3.25 million for a new fire hall in the Quesnel area. The district says the 42-year-old old Red Bluff Fire Hall enables the Quesnel Volunteers Fire Department to protect properties in Red Bluff, Dragon Lake, Rich Bar, and South Quesnel. But a growing population and more commercial and industrial developments means the old building is not enough anymore. Anyone who lives in the service area or owns property there can cast their vote on the proposed loan by October 26th. British Columbia's Independent Forest Practices Watchdog says inadequate monitoring is putting old-growth trees on a coastal island at risk. The Forest Practices Board says it began looking into old-growth forests on Quadra Island, about 250 kilometers northwest of Vancouver, after receiving a complaint from an environmental group. The review found that no one is responsible for monitoring or ensuring that Quadra Island's old forests are conserved, or that Maturita forests are protected from logging. The board says Quadra Island has very little forest older than 250 years old due to harvesting and a number of natural disturbances, but there is an abundance of trees 80 to 120 years old. That's all of our news for now. From all of us here at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.